In northern Egypt, just outside Cairo, a legendary site reveals itself on the western bank of the Nile, the Giza Plateau. Here, the famous tombs of the pharaohs stretch to the sky, still standing after more than 4,500 years. This place is teeming with stories and legends.
The Giza Plateau is dominated by the pyramids, but not less remarkable is the Great Sphinx of Giza, which is on the eastern side, facing out as you approach the pyramids, and it acts as the guardian of the necropolis.
Amid these marvels of human history, the Sphinx stands out in all its splendor. A mythical creature with a human head and the body of a lion.
Here the Egyptians cut off out of a mountain the biggest statue of Egypt, 73 meters long, 21 meters high. So here we are with a huge monument which stayed forever.
What makes the Sphinx of Giza unique is that it was carved directly out of the rocky plateau in a single block, an incredible feat for the time. Standing more than 20 meters tall and 73 meters long, it's the largest monolithic statue in the history of humankind.
Here we see the mountain cut off, with the stones removed to make space to cut the Sphinx inside. And the mountain, it was clear, was much bigger. It was a kind of hill, maybe something similar to what we see behind. So they searched for the best quality of the mountain, which is the head of the Sphinx. It is really the best. Then they discovered that the lower layers were a little bit more softer. But anyhow, they succeeded to cut off one of the most impressive monuments in Egypt.
According to experts, it would have taken around 1 million hours to sculpt something like this out of the rock, using burins, bronze chisels, and wooden mallets. Today, the Sphinx sits in all its majesty, surrounded by the very rock that made it, captivating visitors from all over the globe. For historians and archaeologists, it's one of the most studied sculptures of the ancient world. And yet, after centuries of analysis, Giza's mythical guardian still refuses to give up its secrets. For all its fame, we still know very little about it. There are no clues or inscriptions to hint at its origins. Who is it? When was it built? And why? And the greatest question of all, who was responsible for its construction?
We're speaking about the identity of the Sphinx, who it represents, who built it, because we just don't have a document. We don't have a stele or another stone or temple saying, I built the Sphinx in this year, that year, it represents this and that. We just don't have it today. But until there, we can just have to establish who is the Sphinx according to our knowledge and compare.
Archaeologists are constantly refining their research and their theories with one goal in mind: to reveal the identity of the builders of the Sphinx. To do this, they will have to wind back the clock and search for clues that may be scattered throughout history. A quest that begins at the dawn of the Industrial Age. In the early 19th century, this monumental statue watching over the pyramids looked nothing like the one we know today. Back then, 200 years ago, the Sphinx was almost entirely covered in sand. Anyone who came across it saw nothing but a head rising from the desert.
In modern times, during the 18th and the 19th century, The Sphinx was just known with his head. So people didn't know what it was. It was the head of a man, maybe a pharaoh. People maybe didn't know so much. So they were just seeing a head cut out of a mountain. Most of the people could maybe imagine a colossus, a standing or sitting colossus that you can see elsewhere in Egypt, of huge size.
This mysterious giant head eventually began to raise too many questions. In 1816, Giovanni Battista Caviglia, one of the pioneers of Egyptian archaeology, began to excavate the Giza plateau. His objective? To find out what this legendary figure was, hiding beneath the sand. It was the first obstacle in the quest to find the origin of the Sphinx, and a colossal undertaking. To uncover the statue, thousands of tons of sand were carried away by hand. It uncovered an area of around 1,500 square meters, and its height was as yet unknown. It took a year before Caviglia and his team were able to clear the front section in its entirety.
In 1817, Caviglia cleaned in front of the Sphinx, and then they discovered that it has an animal's paws of a lion.
For the first time in centuries, if not millennia, a part of the statue's enigmatic body was finally revealed. But shortly afterwards, perhaps even the following year, the Sphinx was once again covered by sandstorms. Scores of archaeologists took up the task so that this incredible discovery could continue. With every attempt, it was only partly revealed, only to be buried once more, as if the guardian of Giza wanted its secrets to stay hidden.
There was a lot of clearing away of the head and the shoulders of the Sphinx because they wanted to make measurements and better understand this extraordinary statue. And again, more sand came a multitude of times, and people have then cleared it away again and again.
On January the 7th, 1926, a century after the first attempt, an extraordinary clearing operation led by Egyptologist Emile Barrès was finally able to fully unveil the mysterious statue of Giza.
It came out after maybe 1,000 years or something, maybe 2,000 years. It came out as it was, with the whole body. I think it was an amazing image that time to discover such a huge statue on Earth. And then started immediately, because people understand that this is something unique, unusual. People started immediately to think who it was.
The first crucial stage was now complete. Freed from the sand's clutches, the Sphinx could now begin to tell its story. Emile Barrès and his team went over the vast statue with a fine-tooth comb in the hope of understanding more about it. The first thing they noticed was that the Sphinx had been restored several times over the years. Some parts, like the front feet, had been retouched and reinforced with stone bricks at the time of the Roman Empire in the 2nd century BC. Other modifications dated back further still. This creature, only now emerging from the earth, had apparently been long revered and maintained throughout the ages. But another discovery would allow the scientists of the time to travel back even further and more precisely through the years. That new discovery was the dream stele, a massive block of pink granite carefully positioned between the two giant paws, standing over 3.5 meters tall and 2 meters wide. On it, the archaeologists discovered a vital message. For the first time in history, it mentioned the Great Sphinx, a vital relic for anyone hoping to discover the origins of the mysterious statue.
This stele, cut out of a granite stone, was carved by a king called Thutmose IV. And he's representing himself making offerings to the god Horus of the horizon, to the Sphinx. He's considering the Sphinx as a god. And he's explaining the story.
The king was hunting in the Valley of the Gazelles, it's about southeast of the Sphinx. And he was hunting and hunting and hunting, and then he was really tired, and he came to rest in the shadow of the Sphinx's head and fell asleep. And there he had a dream in which the Sphinx came to him and said, "If you clear the sand away from me, you will become king of Egypt." Because at that point, he was not the heir, he was just a junior prince. So, according to the dream stealer, Thutmose cleaned away everything around the Sphinx, he did some restoration, and then he became king because his older brother died. And then he erected the dream stealer, telling the story of how he had been the chosen one.
It is really a propaganda, because he's saying, I was placed here by the god Sphinx. He's a kingmaker. Most probably had difficulties to succeed. You know, succession of a pharaoh is not always easy. So Thutmose is saying that it was because of the god Sphinx he became a king. And the central line is saying exactly this.
If this story is true, the idea of digging the Sphinx out of the sand had already been raised many years before. In fact, we know that Thutmose IV reigned over Egypt at the start of the 14th century BC during the Golden Age of the 18th dynasty, a period when the Kingdom of Egypt was reunited, dominated the region, and when the stakes of holding power were very high indeed.
We found something politics on that stele, the story. We found that he killed his elder brother. He was supposed to be the king of Egypt. This is why he wrote this story, to show that the God, it chose him to be the king of Egypt. Then everyone will forget the crime that he did.
While the dream stele tells us about the political events taking place around 1400 BC, it also proves that the statue already existed at that time, almost 3,500 years ago. All Thutmose IV did was make use of an earlier religion to justify his place on the throne. Our search for the original builders of the Sphinx will therefore take us back even further into the past. It's time for us to leap back another 1,000 years. To find more clues, we have to return to the time when the Giza plateau was created, along with its famous pyramids. To study the Sphinx's environment and examine the layout of this legendary site, where everything seems to be connected. Even today, scientists are still scouring the area, hoping to uncover its secrets. Scientists like Mark Lenner, one of the world's leading experts on the constructions in Giza.
When I walk the Giza Plateau, every time I'm always taking pictures because I'm always seeing something new. It's like my notebook. I take it with me all the time, and I'm always taking pictures, even if it's the same picture that I've taken many, many times before. So like right now, I'm seeing we're right on the diagonal of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. And one interesting thing about the relationship between the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx is that the diagonal points right at the Sphinx to the southeast. And so, for example, if I take a picture of this perspective and then one of the Sphinx, The two pictures suggest to me that I should look again at that alignment.
According to experts, almost all of the Giza Plateau was sculpted during the 4th dynasty, around the year 2500 BC.
One of the most remarkable times in the history of ancient Egypt is the 4th dynasty. So by the size of these pyramids, we know that during this time, Egypt was very wealthy, everything was very well organized, there was a large labor force, and there was plenty of food to feed them. So clearly this was a time where things moved smoothly, swiftly, the country was economically solid, and the arts and crafts flourished.
It's into this prosperous era that we'll have to immerse ourselves in search of new clues to the creation of the Sphinx. This period is above all marked by the reign of a renowned pharaoh, the great Khufu. In the early days of the Old Kingdom, he was the first to set his sights on Giza. This place offered the ideal conditions to build a structure that would leave an indelible mark on human history. A monumental tomb that would guarantee him a glorious life after death.
I think Khufu came to Giza to build because the Giza Plateau offered him all the best natural conditions that were required for building the Great Pyramid. You have good, hard bedrock here, and Khufu's Great Pyramid is the first one to be built on the bedrock. To the south here at Giza, there are limestone layers that you see in the Sphinx. They go soft and more clay-like, hard, soft, beautiful for cutting stones, for the quarries, for the access to the valley, for the good foundation. The Giza Plateau was ideal.
With its 230-meter-long square base, the Great Pyramid of Khufu rose to a height of over 147 meters until its limestone cladding was destroyed, reducing its height by 10 meters. To build it, over 10,000 laborers worked ceaselessly for 20 years, carving the 2 million blocks of stone, if not more, that were needed.
If you stood in front of the Great Pyramid of Khufu and you know nothing about Egyptology, you will never believe that a human being could build it. The pyramid was the national project of the whole nation. Every household in the south and the north of Egypt participated in building the pyramid by sending workforce and food to help the king.
The total mastery in its execution and its vast dimensions would make the Great Pyramid the tallest structure ever built for nearly 4 millennia. But when he came to the Giza Plateau, Khufu didn't stop at building his own giant tomb. Today, between the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid, many other tombs rise up from the sand.
These tombs were for his senior officials on the west, his senior family members on the east. And over time, the people who served them, their dependents, their officials, when they died, they wanted to be buried near their lord. As he was building his pyramid, he was building an acropolis, a city of the dead, one of the biggest cities of the dead the world has ever seen.
Thanks to Khufu, the Giza Plateau became the focal point of power and memory for ancient Egypt. He left such a mark that his son Khafre followed suit. Around the year 2500 BC, when he came to the throne, Khafre began to construct a pyramid of his own. A structure every bit as impressive in order to sit beside his father for eternity. The building of Giza's funeral complex was a gradual process. A few years later, Menkore, the son of Khafre, added his own great pyramid. It took just 3 generations for this legendary site to take shape in the form that we know today.
It is extraordinary that one family, in the space of about 60, 70 years, had managed to transform the face of Egypt for millennia to come.
And the more we have learned, the more we realize that the best question is maybe not how did the Egyptians build the pyramids, but how did the pyramids help to build Egypt? By amassing all these resources, by establishing a bureaucracy, accounting to make these giant pyramids, it put a spin on Egyptian civilization like a giant gyroscope, sending it into a new direction. And it was never the same again.
According to Egyptologists, it was almost certainly during this flurry of activity on the Giza Plateau that would change Egypt forever that the Sphinx was carved, as if to offer protection to this nascent necropolis. But there's one thing we still don't know. Which of these ambitious pharaohs ordered its construction? To shed some light on the mystery, we need to take a closer look and carefully observe this guardian of the pyramids. This was the first challenge of Mark Lehner's career.
I was determined to come and work here at the Sphinx because I was drawn by the legends of a lost hall of records and the questions of who built the Sphinx and when and why. So I spent every waking moment that I could out here on the Giza Plateau, and especially the area around the Sphinx. It was in 1977 and 78 that I first started working here, actually, and doing archaeology and making maps. I was particularly concerned that nobody had mapped the Sphinx in detail. So we arranged a project to map the Sphinx to scale.
As astonishing as it may seem, this structure that had been revered for thousands of years and fascinated generations of archaeologists had never been precisely mapped. So Mark Lehner began the ambitious process of photogrammetry, a technique that uses photography to precisely record the dimensions of an object. In just a few weeks, he was able to produce the first accurate plans of the statue, not just the design, but also the topographic curves, the structure of the rock, and the tool marks left over time. All this work was carried out on the front and the 2 sides of the body.
For the first time, we could see the Great Sphinx in a drawing, like an architectural drawing, to scale. That took 3 weeks, but we couldn't use the photogrammetry to do a bird's eye view, a straight-on map. So I did that by hand, and it took me 2 years. I did a series of drawings, the top of this paw, the top of that paw, the top of the back, the top of the head, and then I put the drawings together through survey like a jigsaw puzzle. The result is this 1:50 map of the Great Sphinx, the master plan, stone by stone.
For the first time in history, the Great Sphinx could be studied in detail with scientific precision.
What became exciting and satisfying for me was no longer looking for lost civilizations, or even so much the kings and the queens and all the fancy people. What I really loved was capturing ancient realities as they are and freezing them in photographs, line drawings, and then trying to understand what they mean.
When you reach the Giza Plateau, one thing is immediately apparent when you examine the Sphinx. The statue, with its lion's body, is perfectly aligned with the pyramid of Khafre, situated on the higher ground. It's a coincidence that deserves a closer look. Entering this colossal edifice means squeezing along corridors barely big enough for a human being and descending 100 meters beneath millions of tons of rock. At the end of the corridor, in the center of the pyramid, directly beneath its peak, is the burial chamber.
The pyramids are tombs, huge, gigantic tombs for the kings, for the pharaohs. If they were only symbolic tombs, as some think, that the kings weren't really buried here, they're still tombs. There's no getting around that. Every one of them has a sarcophagus, and I think it's very probable this is the sarcophagus where Khafre was laid to rest after he died, for sure after he died, and was mummified.
Building tombs such as these was vitally important to ancient faiths, as demonstrated by the enormity of these structures.
When a king dies, his son, the successor, comes to power, becomes the new king. And the first thing he's doing, he's making his tomb, his pyramid at that time. Not only the tomb, the place from where he will resurrect, he will climb up to the sky. So this is the first thing, let's say, from the first day, he's choosing a place and starting the building.
This is where they thought they were perpetuated and kept alive with their court in the afterworld. The pyramids are tombs for that purpose, but they're not just tombs where you put the king away forever. They are actually like a big resurrection machine where the king and his whole court and society live on in a city of the afterlife.
According to Egyptologists, the pyramid and tomb were only one part of each pharaoh's funeral plans. Just like his father, Khufu, Khafre began to construct a whole complex of his own. After beginning his pyramid, Khafre added another pyramid next to the base of its southern edge. To the east, he built his first temple, the burial temple, from which a 495-meter causeway begins. Further down, another temple was built, the Valley Temple, and next to that, the Temple of the Sphinx was built in honor of the great statue. For Mark Lehner, there's no doubt that the Sphinx was also built under orders from Khafre. According to the archaeologist, every piece in this vast complex follows the same construction principles, carved from the same rock and built with the same materials.
The Sphinx is part of one set piece, like a sculpture. A sculpture includes Khafre's Valley Temple at the end of his long ramp or causeway made out of the living rock. The foundations of the Valley Temple belonging to the Khafre Pyramid are made out of that same rock in the same place. The temple in front of the Sphinx is made from huge limestone blocks taken from the quarry that created the Sphinx. In fact, the side of the causeway forms the south side of the Sphinx itself.
If you look at the Valley Temple, the facade of the Valley Temple of Khafre and the facade of the Temple of the Sphinx look exactly the same.
So it's like clay. You take a piece of clay and you mold out of it two temples, and you mold the great Sphinx in this clay, and then you mold a big ramp coming into these temples. Then it all looks like one piece of sculpture, a set piece, one ensemble. The Sphinx and Khafre are intimately tied together by the very shaping, the very sculpting of the living rock. That's why, for me, it's most probable that Khafre made the Sphinx as part of his pyramid complex.
And so it would seem that around 2500 BC, Khafre designed an entire complex, a perfectly coherent, full-scale sculpture, with the Great Pyramid on one side and the Sphinx on the other. But within this vast architectural complex, one detail interrupts the sense of harmony. The long funeral causeway connecting the Pyramid Temple to the Valley Temple has one intriguing feature.
As we approach the Sphinx, there is a significant deviation between the causeway and the Sphinx. You see how they look like they're oblique to each other at an angle. The causeway is running 13 degrees to the south of due east, where the Sphinx is sitting due east. Now maybe that's grist for the mill, this difference in orientation between the Sphinx and the causeway. Maybe that's grist for the mill of theorists thinking, oh, maybe the Sphinx is older, maybe somebody else made it.
Some Egyptologists are taking this deviation very seriously. It could be enough to undermine Khafre's position as creator of the Sphinx.
One of the curious things about if Khafre had built the Sphinx is that why would he choose this place? Because if I were Khafre, I would have my causeway going straight. And so this suggests that this depression and this lump of stone were already there.
Khafre is avoiding the Sphinx. This feature is quite clear. The Sphinx was there before Khafre built his causeway, before he built his temples and pyramid.
Based on the site's geometry, the Sphinx could well predate Khafre. It could have been carved here long before his reign. We therefore need to see it from another angle.
So when we arrive here, there is something very simple. We see the Sphinx, and behind, the pyramid of Khafre. So one could imagine that the Sphinx is the king Khafre. Why not? Because it's in front of it. But in fact, it's much more complicated than that. Have to see better.
In fact, it's possible that the Sphinx wasn't made to be seen from the front, but in profile, like the majority of Egyptian representations. Indeed, according to Vasil Dobrev, most visitors at the time came not from Cairo as they do today, but from the old capital Memphis. Egyptians would follow the Nile and its canals to Giza to honor the dead, arriving at the site from the southeast. When they reached the necropolis, they would see the Sphinx in profile from end to end, and behind it only one pyramid stood out, the Pyramid of Khufu. Seen from this perspective, this alignment changes everything. It could suggest that this totally unique statue was the work of the first pharaoh that laid claim to this place. Looking more closely, you might even believe that it's Khufu's face, carved out of the mountain.
When we look at the Sphinx, the first question we ask ourselves is who it represents. I think it represents the king Khufu, his face. First of all, because the face of Khufu was quite large. On the contrary, the face of Khafre, his son, is quite long. Not the same. Then the second element, very important element, the Sphinx never had a beard. From the beginning, it was cut off the mountain without a beard. So, this is a big question, because all the images of King Khafre show him with a beard. So it is more easy to connect an image of the Sphinx without a beard to Khufu, who never was represented with a beard.
The question of whether the Sphinx originally had a beard is still a divisive one for the scientific community. Fragments were found at the base of the Sphinx the last time the sand was cleared. But this beard could well have been added during the 18th dynasty, following Thutmose IV's dream. Other Egyptologists believe that it was quite simply broken off, then reattached at the time. The mystery remains unsolved. Whatever the case, there is one last factor to support the theory that it's King Khufu's features that are carved in the stone. And that's the nemes, the iconic pharaoh's head covering worn for thousands of years in ancient Egypt. If we look closely, the Sphinx's nemes displays a particular pattern.
The nemes of the Sphinx is pleated. One large pleat, two small pleats. One large pleat, two small pleats. This pattern of pleating the Sphinx, we can find it with a fragmentary statue found in the temple of King Khufu. So we can connect it with King Khufu. On the contrary, all the images that we know of Khafre with the nemes, it is always flat. It is never pleated. So this is a very important feature. Khafre wouldn't represent himself with something so different from the other images that he represents himself. On the contrary, the pleated nemes can be connected with a statue of King Khufu.
For Vasil Dobrev, the identity of the Sphinx is clear. But one question remains. When we look in detail at the layout of the Giza plateau, it appears that all of Khufu's structures are located to the north of the Sphinx. Whether it be his pyramid, the different cemeteries, or the huge tombs for the members of his court. Why then would he order such a colossal statue to be built so far from the rest of his complex? This undermines the theory that Khufu created the Sphinx. Perhaps the truth lies elsewhere. The Sphinx could still be a representation of Khufu, even if the pharaoh didn't build the statue himself. Perhaps we're dealing with a tribute to the deceased king. This seems plausible when we consider the many symbols that are found around the Sphinx. Around the statue, everything seems to point to a heavenly power, the sun. The decision to portray a hybrid, neither human nor animal, follows the tradition of the Egyptian pantheon, but subverts it. While gods are portrayed with human bodies and animal heads, the Sphinx reverses the roles, placing a human head on an animal body.
It's a lion. A lion is a solar animal. They're golden yellow, they have big gold eyes, and they have this wonderful ruff around their head, which is of course just like the rays of the sun coming out. And the same way that the lion dominates the landscape, so does the sun dominate the cosmos.
In addition to its appearance, its perfect east-west alignment also relates to the sun's movements. And more precisely, to its course throughout the day, from dawn until dusk. For Vasil Dobrev, all these signs point to one thing: that King Khufu was deified after his death and connected to Ra, the supreme god of the sun.
The idea is most probably that Khufu is divine. With his resurrection, he became a solar being because he's not Ra, but he's next to Ra, solar being. And now he comes down because that is the meaning of the pyramid. The pyramid itself, it is the solar rays coming from up to down. Through the pyramid, the god Khufu will come down as the image of the Sphinx, something different, something new, a divine image, not just a human image.
By building the Sphinx, the reincarnated Khufu could reign over Giza for all eternity. But who was behind this tribute? It obviously wasn't the deceased King Khufu himself, and it seems the colossal statue already existed when his son Khafre came to the throne. We must therefore look to another pharaoh, a king who is often overlooked, Djedefre, Khufu's firstborn son, the son who was his direct successor. The timing is perfect. His reign was in between that of Khufu and Khafre, making him the perfect candidate. All the more so because he's thought to have been a devout worshipper of the sun.
At the time of Djedefre, there is a very important cult for the sun. He himself starts to call him the son of Ra. But when he's saying, I'm the son of Ra, he's assimilating his father, who is now resurrected as the god Ra.
Djedefre's close connection to the god Ra strongly suggests he was involved in building the Sphinx, that most sun-like of sculptures. But despite all this, Mark Lehner believes these clues are not enough to dethrone Khafre as the builder of the Sphinx. In fact, he is eager to draw our attention to another of Khafre's structures at Giza. The Temple of the Sphinx, another building in this great complex whose structure is also orientated around the sun and sits right at the foot of the statue.
Now, the temple has been studied by Egyptologists, and in order to understand the meaning of the Sphinx, you have to understand the meaning of this temple. This temple has an open court, open to the sun. 10 colossal statues of the Pharaoh stood around this court. The covered part of the temple is a colonnade. It was supported by 24 granite pillars, polished, maybe for the 24 hours of the day and night. The axis of the temple, defined by the sanctuary on the east and another one on the west, points not at the Sphinx, but it points up the plateau to the south side of the second pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafre. And at the equinoxes, March 21st, 22nd, September 21st, 22nd, the spring and the fall equinoxes, the sun sets exactly on that intersection, the south side of the Khafre pyramid, over the Sphinx's right shoulder and into the sanctuary on the east.
The ancient Egyptians were very good at orientation, so they would have observed these things, calculated angles, and then chosen where to put something that was so meaningful.
This degree of precision was no accident. The temple, the Sphinx, and the Great Pyramid are only aligned because Khafre wanted them to be. With this in mind, it seems clear that all these structures are part of the same complex, dictated by the movements of the sun. They must therefore be the work of Khafre. It's a convincing theory, but the Temple of the Sphinx has one final feature that Mark Lehner wants us to see. It allows us to connect its construction to that of the Sphinx.
This temple was made of huge blocks of limestone that came from the quarry that made the Sphinx itself.
It seems the laborers carved out the mountain that produced the Sphinx while also using it as a quarry to build the temple. To shape the Sphinx, they carved out huge blocks of stone, which they then simply moved a few meters away and used to gradually construct the temple. This technique becomes obvious on closer inspection of the building's remaining walls.
So this yellow band runs continuously through most of the blocks of the Sphinx temple. We call these type A blocks with the yellow band. We know they came from this part of the Sphinx, right across the chest. And they run continuously through the temple walls because as you cut blocks weighing 100 tons from the quarry that created the Sphinx, and you move them down ramps onto this lower floor for baking the walls of the Sphinx temple, you don't have a lot of opportunity with 100-ton blocks to just scramble them up. So it makes sense that they're being put in sequence as they're starting to shape the Sphinx. And what is certain by architecture, by archaeology, is that the Sphinx temple was built after the Khafre Valley temple was already complete. So if the Sphinx temple and the Sphinx are being completed at the same time, and the Khafre Valley temple is already completed, it means the Sphinx was created in the reign of Khafre, and probably late in his reign. It all points to Khafre.
With this timeline in mind, it's hard to deny that Khafre had a role in the construction of the Great Sphinx. In any case, that's what the clues that remain on the site today seem to suggest. For 4,000 years on the Giza plateau, the Sphinx has puzzled and fascinated everyone who comes across it. A statue without equal, revered throughout the ages by many religions and traditions.
It was a very important image that was resurrected when it was already 1,200 years old. So already it was a national symbol. It's where kings came to be ordained, the way popes go to be ordained at the Vatican. Kings would come here in the first year of their reign for the ancient Sphinx to say, yes, I endorse your kingship.
So the Sphinx has had a very complex history and a very interesting relationship, not just as a god who was worshipped by the ancient Egyptians, but by a fearsome figure of the pharaonic past, filled with magic and power for all the people who lived in Egypt, a great curiosity for other people from abroad to come and experience, and of course the object of study for scholars and antiquarians.
Even today, archaeologists and Egyptologists are still working to understand the original purpose of this staggering sculpture.
The Sphinx was built by Khafre to worship his father, Khufu, who rises and sits as the sun god from the temple in front of the Sphinx.
Even if one theory seems more persuasive than the others, it's crucial to keep asking questions, to ensure that no scenario or line of inquiry has been overlooked, and that the historical truth has not been missed. Khufu? Djedefre? Khafre? Only one thing is certain. Within a matter of years, this family achieved something incredible, changing the face of Egypt forever and leaving an indelible mark on human history.